Most people remain poor not because the world is unfair, but because they cannot escape the psychological traps they willingly carry inside their own heads. And the thing about psychological traps is that they don't feel like traps. They feel like habits, preferences, emotions, instincts, familiar comforts that quietly sabotage you for decades. It amazes me how often people blame external forces for their financial failures when the real enemy lives between their ears. If you truly understood how often your mind lies to you, you'd never trust your impulses again. You see, poverty, persistent poverty, is rarely the result of one bad decision. It's the result of lifelong patterns of thinking that guarantee you never accumulate real wealth. And before people get offended, let me be clear. I'm not talking about people who suffer misfortune. I'm talking about people who have opportunity but waste it through self-sabotage. People who cannot escape their own psychology. People who build their own cage and then complain about the bars. People who convince themselves they're powerless while actively reinforcing the habits that keep them stuck. Let me start with something you won't like hearing. Your emotions are the most expensive luxury you have. Most people let feelings drive decisions. Fear, envy, excitement, impatience, and then they act surprised when their bank account reflects chaos instead of progress. If you behave emotionally with money, you will stay poor. It's that simple. Emotional impulses are short-term, but money requires long-term thinking. If your emotions control your financial decisions, your future is already mortgaged to your instincts. And instincts are terrible investors, terrible savers, and terrible planners. Take impatience, for example. People think impatience is harmless. It's not. It's one of the most expensive psychological patterns in existence. Impatience makes you chase quick wins. It makes you abandon long-term plans. It makes you interrupt compounding, which is the closest thing to magic humans have invented. Compounding requires time. Time requires patience, and patience requires discipline. Most people fail at the first step. They want everything now. Now returns, now results, now rewards, but the world doesn't pay you for impatience. It punishes you. Impatience is poverty in slow motion. Then there's this absurd human tendency to imitate stupidity. People see someone making a reckless financial move and think, if he can do it, so can I. They imitate noise instead of wisdom. They follow hype instead of facts. Humans are social creatures, and that social wiring becomes a financial curse. If you behave like the crowd, you will get the crowd's results, mostly mediocre, often disastrous. But people would rather fail in a group than succeed alone. That's how powerful the need for social approval is. It keeps people poor their entire lives. Another trap that keeps people poor is denial. Denial is comforting. It lets you avoid responsibility. It lets you pretend things will magically improve. People deny their spending habits, deny their lack of savings, deny their bad investments, deny their poor judgment. And denial is expensive because it delays the truth until the cost becomes catastrophic. You can ignore reality for a while, but reality always collects the bill. And the longer you delay payment, the higher the interest becomes. Financial denial is not harmless, it's corrosive. People also underestimate how destructive envy is. Envy doesn't just make you unhappy, it makes you stupid. You see someone richer, younger, luckier, faster, and instead of learning from them, you obsess over not being them. Envy pushes people into decisions that have nothing to do with rational goals and everything to do with emotional discomfort. They spend to look successful. They invest to catch up. They take risks to not feel left behind. Envy is a tax you pay for looking at other people instead of looking at your own reality. And it's a tax with no upper limit. You can envy yourself into bankruptcy. Another psychological trap is the inability to delay gratification. People want reward now and comfort now and entertainment now. They consume as if consumption is progress, but consumption doesn't lead to wealth. Delayed gratification does. Wealth comes from sacrificing today for a better tomorrow. The problem is that most people sacrifice tomorrow for a slightly more comfortable today. They crave dopamine more than they crave freedom, and dopamine is a terrible financial advisor. And let me tell you something blunt. If you don't learn to control your impulses, someone else will control your money. Retailers will control it. Advertisers will control it. Influencers will control it. The financial industry will control it. Politicians will control it. Anyone who understands your weaknesses can monetize them. If you don't master your psychology, you will be mastered by someone who has studied it. And trust me, they already have. People also stay poor because they refuse to confront their own incompetence. They think admitting ignorance is humiliating. It isn't. It's liberating. If you admit you don't understand something, you can learn. But most people pretend. They pretend they understand investing. They pretend they understand budgeting. They pretend they understand risk. And when reality contradicts their fantasies, they double down on the pretense. They cling to bad decisions because letting go would require acknowledging that they were wrong. Ego keeps more people poor than any economic crisis ever has. And then there's the trap of magical thinking, the belief that wealth will somehow arrive through luck, fate, or a miracle. People fantasize about windfalls instead of building foundations. They imagine a future where everything falls into place without effort, discipline, or sacrifice. Magical thinking is comforting because it relieves you of responsibility. But it's a lie. Wealth is a byproduct of rational behavior, not fantasy. If your financial plan relies on hope, it's not a plan, it's an emotional escape. People are also trapped by the illusion of effort. They mistake busyness for progress. They think working harder is the same as working smarter. It's not. People exhaust themselves on low-value tasks and then wonder why they never get ahead. They chase the wrong opportunities, follow the wrong advice, and commit to the wrong priorities. And because they're tired, they think they've earned success. Effort only matters when applied intelligently. Hard work without direction is just a self-inflicted tax on your limited time. Another psychological trap that keeps people poor is overconfidence. The world is full of people who think they're smarter than they are, and the market is full of ways to punish people who believe that. Overconfidence leads to speculation, bad timing, reckless risk-taking, and ignoring warning signs. Overconfidence convinces you that the rules don't apply to you, that you can outsmart risk, outguess the market, outrun consequences. But risk doesn't care about your self-esteem. The market doesn't care about your confidence. Reality is not impressed by your self-belief. Let me tell you something important. Your brain evolved to survive, not to build wealth. It evolved for short-term threats, not long-term planning. It evolved for social belonging, not independent thinking. It evolved for instant gratification, not compounding. It evolved for comfort, not discipline. If you follow your instincts, you will remain poor. Wealth requires going against your evolutionary programming. It requires resisting impulses that feel natural. It requires doing things that feel boring, slow, and even uncomfortable. People also fall into the trap of resentment. They resent people who succeed. They resent people who discipline themselves. They resent people who make sacrifices. But resentment is emotional poison. It distracts you from your own shortcomings by focusing on the success of others. Resentment doesn't improve your life. It simply justifies your stagnation. You cannot build wealth while resenting those who have it. Your mind cannot move toward something it hates. Right? Another trap is fatalism, the belief that nothing you do matters. People convince themselves they're doomed by circumstance or fate or the economy. That mindset is lethal. If you believe you have no control, you'll act like you have no control. And acting powerless is the fastest way to remain powerless. Victimhood feels comfortable because it removes responsibility. But responsibility is the only path to improvement. People also stay poor because they lack long-term vision. They make decisions based on the next hour, the next day, the next paycheck. Wealthy people think in decades, poor people think in weekends. And the irony is that long-term thinking is not difficult, it's just unfamiliar. Anyone can choose long-term behavior, but almost no one does. They prefer the comfort of immediacy over the discomfort of discipline. Now, here's something that will offend you, but is absolutely true. You are not stuck because you're unlucky. You're stuck because you keep repeating the same psychological patterns while expecting different financial outcomes. That's not misfortune, that's delusion. And the worst part, most people double down on the very behaviors that keep them poor. They defend their habits as if their habits are sacred. They get angry when confronted with the truth. They cling to excuses because excuses feel safe. But excuses don't pay bills. Excuses don't build wealth. Excuses don't compound. Excuses don't change your life. You know what keeps people poor? Comfort, not discomfort. Comfort. Comfort traps you. Comfort convinces you that your current habits are fine. Comfort whispers that you can change later. Later becomes never. Comfort is a silent financial killer. Let me tell you something simple that people hate hearing. If you don't get brutally honest about your psychology, you will stay exactly where you are. Most people don't realize that their mind is not designed for wealth. Your brain is wired for survival, not prosperity. It's wired to conserve energy, avoid discomfort, and seek immediate reward. Those instincts were useful when your ancestors were running from predators or foraging for food. But in a modern financial world, those same instincts will bankrupt you. You cannot let an ancient brain navigate a modern economy. Yet most people do exactly that. They behave as if reacting emotionally is a valid financial strategy. It isn't. It never has been. It never will be. Another trap people fall into is the obsession with appearing successful rather than becoming successful. This is one of the most expensive psychological patterns of all. People who don't have money spend money to look like they do. They buy symbols instead of assets. They chase status instead of stability. They value perception over reality. And the market punishes that mentality without mercy. The urge to look impressive has kept more people poor than recessions ever have. Impressing people is costly. Financial independence is free. But people choose vanity because vanity feels good immediately, while discipline feels good only decades later. And most people can't wait decades. They can barely wait days, and people love to say they want freedom. But freedom requires sacrifice, and sacrifice is uncomfortable. So instead of choosing savings, they choose spending. Instead of choosing discipline, they choose indulgence. Instead of choosing investment, they choose entertainment. Then they complain about their lack of progress, as if progress is something that magically appears. It doesn't. Progress is purchased by giving up what you want now for what you want most. But people rarely know what they want most. They only know what they want now, and now is a terrible master. Let me tell you something people never want to admit. The average person is addicted to distraction. Distraction keeps them poor. They spend hours consuming content, gossip, drama, entertainment, and then claim they don't have time to learn about money. They know every detail about celebrities, but almost nothing about compounding. They understand social media trends, but not interest rates. They obsess over other people's lives while ignoring their own future. And the world rewards their distraction by selling them even more nonsense. People underestimate how much distraction costs. It doesn't just steal your time, it steals your clarity. It prevents you from seeing your own flaws. It keeps you in a perpetual state of mental fog. A foggy mind cannot build wealth. A foggy mind cannot plan. A foggy mind cannot resist temptation. Distraction is not entertainment. It is self-inflicted sabotage disguised as leisure. Another trap that keeps people poor is the tendency to avoid pain at all costs. Growth requires pain. Learning requires discomfort. Improving requires facing weaknesses. But people flee from pain. They flee from feedback. They flee from accountability. They flee from anything that threatens their self-image. And because they flee from these things, they remain exactly as they are. Money doesn't flow to people who avoid discomfort. It flows to people who confront it. You know what wealthy people do? They endure discomfort early so they can enjoy freedom later. You know what poor people do? They avoid discomfort early and end up suffering far worse discomfort later. The bill always comes due. Pain ignored becomes pain multiplied. People choose comfort and then pay for that comfort with decades of regret. Here's another cold truth. Procrastination is poverty and procrastination's clothing. People delay saving, they delay learning, they delay investing, they delay making hard choices, they delay responsibility. They assume the future will be a better time to get serious, but the future is just the present, postponed. And when the present shows up, most people repeat their old behaviors. Procrastination is a form of optimism, the dangerous kind. It allows you to believe that you have more time than you actually do. Time wasted in youth becomes scarcity in old age. People also fall into the trap of linear thinking. They underestimate exponential growth. They underestimate compounding. They underestimate how small actions done consistently shape a lifetime. They think doubling their savings is impossible, so they never try. They think small investments don't matter, so they don't invest. They underestimate how little they know and overestimate how much they deserve. Their relationship with reality is warped by wishful thinking. And wishful thinking is a psychological sinkhole. Let me tell you something even more uncomfortable. Most people stay poor because they defend the beliefs that keep them poor. They cling to bad ideas like life preservers. They argue for their limitations. They justify their weaknesses. They treat constructive criticism like an attack. They protect their ego instead of protecting their future. And an ego that needs protection will always be at war with progress. Another psychological trap is the inability to learn from others. Most people don't observe, they don't analyze, they don't reflect. They see someone making smart financial choices, and instead of learning, they rationalize why those choices don't apply to them. They reject good ideas because the ideas challenge their laziness. They reject wisdom because wisdom demands responsibility. They reject discipline because discipline demands consistency. They reject success principles because success requires effort over time. And most people only like effort in short bursts. People want change without changing. They want improvement without sacrifice. They want wealth without discipline, and when the world doesn't reward this fantasy, they blame circumstances, they blame the economy, they blame unfairness, they blame everyone except themselves. Blame is comforting. It preserves the illusion of innocence, but blame pays no dividends. Another trap is emotional spending. And it is far more destructive than people admit. People buy things to feel better, to soothe anxiety, to relieve boredom, to escape reality, to numb themselves. They spend money the way some people drink alcohol, to avoid facing something. Emotional spending feels good in the moment but creates long-term chains. Every unnecessary purchase is a vote for staying exactly where you are. And once spending becomes emotional, rationality disappears. People also remain poor because they lack clarity. They don't know what they want financially. They don't know what they're aiming for. They don't define goals, or if they do, the goals are vague fantasies. I want to be comfortable. Comfortable how? Comfortable when? Comfortable with what resources? Vague desires do not lead to concrete results. The mind cannot pursue what it cannot visualize. And most people's financial dreams are blurry at best, delusional at worst. You know what else keeps people poor? They avoid information that contradicts their worldview. They consume entertainment instead of education. They follow people who reinforce their biases. They treat financial success as luck rather than behavior. They want reassurance, not reality. And reassurance feels warm, but it keeps you ignorant. Reality feels cold, but it keeps you alive. Another psychological trap is the worship of shortcuts. People are desperate for easy solutions. They want hacks, tips, secrets, quick wins. They want to bypass the hard work, the discipline, the time. And in that desperation for shortcuts, they become prey. Scam artists survive because people want shortcuts. Overpriced courses thrive because people want shortcuts. Ridiculous investment schemes exist because people want shortcuts. Shortcuts are illusions designed to exploit impatience. There is no elevator to wealth, only stairs. Let me be exceedingly clear. Anyone trying to sell you instant success is selling you the very trap that will keep you poor. And here's a psychological trap almost no one admits to: the addiction to complaining. Complaining gives you the illusion of control. It feels like action, but it's paralysis. People complain about prices, inflation, wages, rent, opportunity, politicians, the market, taxes, everything. Complaining replaces responsibility. It creates emotional relief instead of real change. The more people complain, the less they do. The less they do, the poorer they stay. And the truly dangerous part is that complaining attracts other complainers. And once you're in a group of people who all justify their stagnation, escaping becomes almost impossible. Your social environment becomes your psychological environment, which becomes your financial destiny. If you surround yourself with people who normalize poor choices, you will make them. If you surround yourself with people who normalize excellence, discipline, and ambition, you will grow. Humans imitate their tribe whether they realize it or not. Another trap is living in reaction instead of intention. People spend their lives reacting to bills, reacting to emergencies, reacting to temptations, reacting to crises. They never take control. They never take initiative. They never build systems. Wealthy people design their financial life. Poor people drift through it. Drifting is comfortable but expensive. Control is uncomfortable but rewarding. Here's something else people rarely acknowledge. Most people are terrified of boredom. They would rather make a dumb financial move than sit still. They buy, sell, upgrade, swap, trade, not because it's smart, but because it feels active. Activity tricks them into believing they're making progress, but in reality, activity without strategy is chaos. The rich get richer by sitting still longer than the poor believe is rational. The poor stay poor by mistaking motion for progress. Another psychological trap is pride. Pride convinces you that you don't need help, don't need advice, don't need to learn, don't need guidance. Pride tells you that you're smarter than the evidence suggests. Pride prevents growth. Wealth accumulation is a humbling process. You must admit ignorance, you must correct mistakes, you must question your assumptions. Many people would rather stay poor than appear foolish. That is the height of self-sabotage. People also fail because they underestimate long-term consequences. Small decisions repeated consistently shape your entire financial reality. A little overspending here, a little impulse purchase there, a missed savings contribution, a reckless investment, a habit of procrastination. These seem small, but over years they accumulate into a destiny. Poverty is often the sum of small decisions repeated with conviction. And here's the uncomfortable truth: your financial life is a reflection of your psychological life. If your habits are chaotic, your finances will be chaotic. And if your thinking is sloppy, your bank account will be sloppy. If your discipline is weak, your wealth will be weak. If your emotions dominate you, your money will escape you. Wealth isn't built in spreadsheets, it's built in psychology. Wealth is behavioral. And until people fix their behavior, they will stay chained to the same financial frustrations year after year. It's not the market keeping them poor. It's not the government. It's not their boss. It's not their upbringing. It's not the economy. The greatest enemy is the unexamined mind, the set of psychological patterns operating quietly and powerfully in the background. And discipline is one of those patterns. People think discipline is optional, like a personality trait. It's not optional. Discipline is a requirement for survival in the financial world. Without discipline, your decisions become reactionary, driven by whatever emotion happens to be shouting the loudest at that moment. And emotions shout loudly, especially when money is involved. If you can't control your impulses, you will always be controlled by circumstance. People underestimate how dangerous impulsiveness is. One impulsive decision can erase years of progress. A rushed purchase, a reckless investment, a poorly judged financial commitment, a reaction to fear or excitement. Impulsiveness is like leaving the door to your bank vault open during a storm. One strong gust and everything blows away. Another trap that quietly keeps people poor is the tendency to exaggerate short-term problems and underestimate long-term ones. People obsess over a bill this month but ignore the financial shape of the next 30 years. They panic about a temporary setback but remain calm about the habits that are destroying their future. They worry about being uncomfortable today but ignore the suffering they are guaranteeing tomorrow. The future is the most neglected part of most people's financial lives, and yet the future is where you will spend most of your life. People also fall into a trap of financial fatalism. They convince themselves they're doomed to stay where they are. They believe wealth is for the lucky, the talented, the privileged, not for them. That belief becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. When you convince yourself you can't win, you don't bother playing correctly. When you believe effort is pointless, you don't make any. When you think the game is rigged, you never learn the rules. Fatalism feels like protection from disappointment, but it is actually a prison. You lock yourself inside a mindset that keeps you exactly where you are. And then you have the trap of inconsistent behavior. People can behave intelligently on Monday and foolishly on Tuesday, disciplined in January and reckless in February. Wealth is not created by occasional brilliance, but by consistent rationality. You cannot build a strong financial life on sporadic good decisions. You need patterns, sustainable, repeatable patterns, that accumulate into strength over decades. Inconsistent behavior destroys compounding. It creates volatility, not stability. And volatility in your behavior produces volatility in your net worth. Here's something else that holds people back: the inability to say no. Poor people say yes to everything. Yes to outings, yes to purchases, yes to emotional spending, yes to obligations, yes to lifestyle creep. They fear missing out, fear disappointing others, fear being judged. But every yes costs something. Wealthy people, truly wealthy people, learn to say no more often than they say yes. No to unnecessary expenses, no to distractions, no to obligations that drain time and resources, no to anything that doesn't align with their goals. Every yes is a withdrawal from your future. Every no is a deposit. Another trap is the refusal to think independently. Most people don't have financial thoughts. They have financial echoes. They repeat what they've heard from friends, family, pundits, marketers, and social media. They rarely sit alone in silence and think for themselves. Independent thinking is rare and uncomfortable. It requires you to examine your assumptions, challenge your beliefs, and analyze your behavior. It demands intellectual honesty. But honesty is painful, and people avoid pain. So they follow the herd, imitate nonsense, and end up in predictable trouble. Another psychological trap is the belief that complexity equals intelligence. People assume that sophisticated plans are superior to simple ones. They invest in things they don't understand because they think understanding is optional. It isn't. Complexity is often just disguised ignorance. And ignorance combined with money is combustible. Wealth is built through simple, boring, intelligent decisions repeated consistently. But boredom feels like failure to the average person. They crave excitement, which is why they constantly chase shiny objects. Meanwhile, people who embrace simplicity quietly build fortunes. Let me tell you something people rarely grasp. You don't need to be brilliant to be wealthy. You just need to avoid being stupid for a very long time. That requires psychological stability, not genius. People don't fail because they're dumb. They fail because they can't control their psychology. They can't stop themselves from acting on feelings, habits, impulses, biases, and fears. They are at war with themselves, and they lose that war long before they lose money. And another costly trap is the inability to control your environment. Your environment shapes your thinking far more than you realize. If you surround yourself with spenders, you will spend. If you surround yourself with complainers, you will complain. If you surround yourself with gamblers, you will gamble. Humans imitate their environment more than they imitate logic. Your financial habits are a reflection of your cultural diet, the people you talk to, the content you consume, the beliefs you normalize. Changing your financial life often requires changing your environment first. People remain poor because they underestimate just how expensive bad habits are over time. A few extra purchases a month might feel insignificant, but multiply those by 120 months and add compounding of lost opportunity. Suddenly it becomes enormous. People talk about the cost of living, but very few understand the cost of undisciplined living. Everything costs more when done without intention. Habits accumulate interest, either positive or negative, and most people accumulate negative interest for decades without noticing. Another trap is financial illiteracy paired with financial confidence. People who know the least often think they know the most. They rely on intuition rather than information. They rely on rumors rather than research. They rely on emotion rather than evidence. The combination of ignorance and confidence is fatal. It leads to decisions that look bold but are actually reckless. And the market punishes recklessness without delay. People stay poor because they cannot delay the pleasure of consumption long enough to enjoy the reward of compounding. Compounding is powerful, but only for those who respect time. Most people don't. They treat time carelessly, casually, as if they have an unlimited supply. They don't. Time is the most valuable asset and the most wasted. Poor people waste time casually and wonder why they never get ahead. Wealthy people treat time like gold because it is. Another trap is refusing to accept responsibility. People blame the economy, blame their parents, blame their circumstances, blame their boss, blame their luck, blame their upbringing. Blame is emotional comfort. Responsibility is emotional discomfort. But responsibility is the only thing that creates change. Blame gives you an excuse. Responsibility gives you power. People who refuse responsibility for their financial lives never escape poverty because they never confront the behaviors keeping them there. Some people stay poor because they obsess over fairness. They want the world to be fair. They want effort to equal reward. They want justice. But the world is not fair, and waiting for fairness is a guaranteed route to disappointment. Wealth is not distributed fairly. Opportunities are not distributed fairly. Intelligence is not distributed fairly. Fighting this reality does nothing. Navigating it does everything. If you waste your life demanding fairness, you will never build wealth. You'll spend your time comparing instead of creating. Another trap is toxic optimism, believing things will magically work out because you want them to. Hope is not a strategy. Optimism without preparation is delusion. People plan as if emergencies only happen to other people. They act as if debt is harmless, savings are optional, and the future will somehow be easier. This optimism prevents people from building buffers, preparing for volatility, and resisting impulsive behavior. You cannot rely on hope to build your financial life. You need structure, discipline, and a ruthless understanding of risk. A different trap is the belief that small actions don't matter. People say, it's only a few dollars. It's only one purchase. It's only one mistake. But small things repeated shape the trajectory of your entire life. You don't become wealthy all at once. You become wealthy one disciplined decision at a time. You don't become poor all at once. You become poor one undisciplined decision at a time. People underestimate the power of accumulation of good or bad, but because they are blind to compounding. And then there is the most dangerous trap of all, the refusal to change. People cling to their identity, their habits, their comfort, their worldview. They resist new ideas, new strategies, new behaviors. They want new outcomes, but not new actions. They defend the very patterns that keep them stuck because those patterns feel familiar. Change requires letting go of who you've been. Most people won't do that. They'd rather protect their identity than upgrade their future. Let me tell you the truth as directly as possible. If you don't change your mind, your money will never change. Wealth begins in the mind, not in the bank account. Your bank account is just a mirror. It reflects your decisions. Your decisions reflect your psychology. If you want to stop being poor, you must fix the psychological traps that keep you poor. Stop reacting emotionally and stop seeking comfort. Stop chasing status.
Stop blaming others.
Stop waiting for miracles. Stop repeating patterns that sabotage your progress.
Stop following the crowd.
Stop trusting your impulses. Stop lying to yourself. Stop justifying your failures. Stop pretending you don't know what you need to do.
You know exactly what you need to do.
You just don't like doing it. Wealth is not complicated. It is psychologically difficult. And you can become wealthy, or at least financially strong, not by becoming brilliant, but by becoming consistent. Not by becoming lucky, but by becoming intentional. Not by mastering the market, but by mastering yourself.
You must think for the long term while everyone else thinks for the weekend.
You must act with discipline while everyone else acts with impulse.
You must save while others spend.
You must invest while others consume. You must learn while others distract themselves. You must endure discomfort while others seek entertainment. And if you do that for long enough, wealth will eventually feel inevitable. People ask me how to escape these psychological traps. The answer is simple but not easy. Be brutally honest with yourself. Observe your own behavior. Study your weaknesses.
Confront your impulses. Reject excuses and
adopt discipline.
Seek wisdom, not entertainment.
Choose long-term thinking over short-term pleasure. Your mind is either your greatest asset or your greatest liability. For most people, it is a liability. Turn it into an asset. And if you want to escape poverty, you must escape the version of yourself that created it. And that transformation, not money, is the real wealth.